My grandpa told me there was a monster in the mountains. Every 10 years, it would come down to eat human flesh and take a new human skin. I didn't believe him, not until that day on the mountain when I saw a figure in the fog. It was waving at me. When I got home, I told my grandma what I saw. Immediately, she grabbed a kitchen knife and rushed into the yard. She slammed my grandpa down onto the flower bed. The sharp blade was just millimeters from the back of his neck. "John, it's come!" she cried out. "It's back again." My grandpa, startled, replied, "Impossible. It's not time yet." "But Leo, he saw it." "Son?" Grandpa asked, his voice trembling. "Did you really see it?" My legs were already weak with fear. I stuttered, I don't know. I just saw Jack. He said he was coming down to eat meat." Up on the mountain, I had gathered my courage to get a closer look. I could vaguely recognize him. It was the village chief's son, Jack, who had been missing for 2 years. His clothes were torn, his hair was as thin as weeds, and his mouth was stretched in an impossibly wide grin, almost reaching his ears. His withered arm waved me to come closer. I was so scared that I just ran for my life. Grandpa let out a long sigh, and the light in his eyes dimmed. He turned to Grandma and gave her a slow, silent nod. Grandma started to sob. With tears in her eyes, she looked at me and said, "Don't look." I immediately covered my eyes, terrified. I didn't understand why they were doing this. They seemed so afraid of Jack. But shouldn't they be happy that he was back? John, I need to discuss something with you," a voice called out. It was the village chief. A moment later, his voice rose into a desperate scream. "No!" I slowly opened a slit between my fingers. I saw my grandpa kneeling on the ground, his head hanging over the flower bed. A bloody gash was cut across the back of his neck. His eyes, bulging like a dead fish's, stared lifelessly at me. Grandma had killed my grandpa. "Why? Why?" The village chief stomped his foot in anger. "Chief, Leo saw your son," Grandma said, collapsing to the ground. The chief looked at her in disbelief. "How is that possible? It's only been 2 years. Your son told Leo he was coming down to eat meat. If I didn't kill John, it would have definitely come for Leo." Her words hit the chief like a truck. He staggered backward and looked at me. "Did you really see him?" I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "And he said he was coming down to eat meat?" I nodded again. The chief deflated completely. He stared at the distant mountain, muttering to himself, "So it really has come, but it's only been 2 years." Then he said to my grandma, "Mary, since John is already gone, you should finish the preparations. It would be best if we can send it away, but if we can't let it keep tormenting us like this." My grandma nodded through her tears. "Chief, please take Leo to your house for the night." The chief grabbed my crying self and walked away without looking back. As we left, I glanced over my shoulder and saw my grandma carrying a large basin out of the house. That night, the village chief stood by the window and didn't sleep at all. His wife gently patted my back. "Why did my grandma kill my grandpa? Shouldn't everyone be happy that Jack is back?" The chief's wife forced a smile. "Go to sleep. It will all be over tomorrow." Before dawn, the chief left the house. His wife was sound asleep. I carefully climbed out of bed and followed him. He went to my house. When he saw the clean sheet of human skin hanging from the old tree by the gate, he started screaming and pounding on our door like a madman. Seeing that smooth, pale skin, a shiver went down my spine. Cold sweat crawled all over my back like ants. That was my grandpa's skin. Next to the gate was a large basin, the one Grandma had brought out yesterday. A piece of a white leg bone was sticking out of it. The chief's screams attracted the other villagers. When they saw my grandpa's skin, they were all horrified. "It's come down again?" one person asked. "That's not right. It's not time yet," said another. Then someone pointed out, "Wait, why is the meat in the basin untouched?" The chief frowned at the closed gate.
and ordered everyone to break it down. A few young men charged at the door. It flew open. Next to the flower bed lay a small skeleton, completely dismantled, without a single scrap of flesh left on it. A bloody sheet of human skin, caked with mud, was plastered limply against the side of the flower bed. The silver hair on the scalp had been almost entirely ripped out. "Grandma!" I screamed and ran towards her, but a neighbor quickly picked me up. "Close your eyes, Leo. Don't look!" An old man next to us gasped. "It only ate the flesh, but didn't take the skin. It's not satisfied. I'm afraid it will be back." The chief gritted his teeth. "Damn it, if it doesn't want to leave, then we'll make it stay. There are so many of us in this village. Are you telling me we can't kill one beast?" The villagers were shocked. "But it's a monster that skins people and eats them," someone reminded him. The chief glared at him. "So what? This time, I'm gonna skin it and eat its flesh." The chief was a famous hunter. He and his partner, Victor, used to hunt bears for a living. After he said that, no one dared to question him again. A small, thin old man with eyes as sharp as an eagle squeezed through the crowd. He was full of energy, but he limped on his left leg. He looked at my grandma's remains and said, "It seems the Skin-Peeler Ape is not satisfied with John and Mary's skin."
Hearing the name Skin-Peeler Ape, I shuddered. Grandpa had told me about it, but I always thought it was just a story. Could it be real? After wearing Jack's skin, it's no longer satisfied with old withered folks like us, Victor said. He turned and looked at me with a grim smile. "Unless we offer it a fresh, tender skin." "Victor," the chief yelled at him. "If you're scared, then go home. We can manage without you." Victor gave a wicked smile and patted his crippled leg. "Me? Scared? If I was scared, my leg wouldn't be broken." He bent down, pushed aside the flowers, and pulled out a silver bracelet. It was the one my grandma always wore. He limped over to me, wiped the blood off with his sleeve, and pressed it firmly into my palm. As he turned to leave, he shouted, "If you're a man, go home and get your weapons. You all remember where I live, right? I'll have the strong liquor waiting for you." The chief took me back to his house and took his hunting rifle and bullets from the cabinet. "Don't leave the house," he told his wife. "I'll be back later. Take care of Leo." "Maybe we should just endure it again? Maybe it's already gone?" "No," the chief said. "Victor is right. The monster isn't interested in the elderly anymore. It has its eyes on the children now. We can't let it harm them." He took a small clay jar which contained a powder. "Remember, do not go outside until I get back." He sprinkled the powder along the doorway and left quickly. "What exactly is the Skin-Peeler Ape? Why does it want to harm us?" I asked. The chief's wife sighed and slowly told me everything. The mountain behind our village used to be called Ape Mountain. Over 100 apes once lived there, and they lived in peace with the villagers. Until one year, a terrible drought hit. The crops failed, the livestock died, there was no food, no water. People were starving, eating tree bark and wild grass. My great-great-grandfather was the village chief back then. He knew that things continued, people would start eating each other. So he went up to 100 Ape Mountain alone, pulling an empty cart. When he came down again, the cart was piled high with bloody meat. The flesh had been skinned, stacked in a small mountain. That cart of meat saved everyone in our village. Later, he told the villagers that the meat was borrowed from the apes on the mountain. He had made a pact with the largest, oldest ape. The pact stated that in the future, the meat had to be repaid many times over. Every 10 years, the villagers had to offer human flesh and human skin to the old ape. So every family drew lots to decide the order of sacrifice. The family whose turn it was had to offer one of their own. The skin was hung by the door and the meat placed beside it. The Skin-Peeler Ape would come, eat the meat, and wear the skin. For decades, the deal was never broken. To ensure the family lines could continue, it was always the old and frail men who were chosen as sacrifices. The young were never offered. But this tradition was broken 2 years ago. It was the chief's family's turn.
That year, the chief fell ill and was bedridden. His son, Jack, a good boy, couldn't bear to kill his sick father, so young Jack took his father's place. When the chief woke up, he was furious. He asked his wife why she didn't stop Jack. His hair turned white overnight. As she finished the story, the chief's wife took out the sacrificial list. Written on it, after the chief's name, was my family's name. Seeing it, my heart felt like it was being stabbed with a knife. I thought of my grandpa and grandma and I began to cry again. Late into the night, the chief still hadn't returned. His wife was humming a lullaby, trying to get me to sleep. Just as we were both drifting off, a harsh knocking sound suddenly shattered the silence. "Mom, it's me. Open the door." The chief's wife's body went stiff. The hand patting my back stopped. My own heart leapt into my throat. It was Jack's voice. This time the sound came from the window. "Mom, please open the door. It's me, Jack." I turned my head stiffly towards the window. A blurry human face was pressed against the glass.
"Mom, I can see you. Open the door." The face was almost flat against the window pane. I couldn't make out its features, but its blood-red mouth stretched wide to its ears was all too clear. I could feel its eyes darting back and forth, trying to see inside. The chief's wife signaled for me to be quiet. I saw beads of sweat forming on her forehead. "Mom, why won't you open the door? It's so cold out here." "Mom, I miss you so much." The chief's wife held me tightly, her tears falling onto my face. She kept whispering, "I'm sorry, Jack. I'm sorry." After about 5 minutes, the knocking stopped. The face at the window disappeared. A crying sound suddenly came from outside. "Mom, why didn't you stop me back then? I'm so cold now, and it hurts so much." Jack was weeping outside the door. The chief's wife trembled, then broke down and began to cry loudly as well. "My son, it was my fault. Mom should have stopped you." She suddenly lost her mind and stumbled towards the door. I wanted to scream, to stop her, but my throat felt like it was blocked. I scrambled out of bed to chase her, but she had already thrown the door open. "My boy, it was my fault. Mom is so sorry," she cried, walking out into the night. "Mom, you came. I'm not cold anymore now that I see you." It was pitch black outside. I could only see the chief's wife run with her arms wide open towards a dark shadow. Then she let out a muffled grunt. Her body was suddenly yanked forward. A sickening sound of tearing and snapping filled the air. Terrified, I curled up in a corner, shaking uncontrollably. The thick smell of blood drifted in from the half-open door. After a moment, everything fell silent. Suddenly, a dark shadow appeared in the doorway again. I don't know if it saw me. I could only cover my mouth, terrified to make a sound. But then, the shadow outside spoke. "Leo, are you asleep?" I froze. It was the voice of the chief's wife. "No," I answered instinctively. "Are you okay?" The voice chuckled. "I'm fine. It's gone. It won't be back." "Then come back inside quickly. Let's not go out again." "Hehe, okay, but could you come help me clean up the yard first?" Something felt wrong, but I stood up anyway and walked out from the corner. "Hurry, child. I can't do it by myself," the voice urged. I quickened my pace. Just as I was about to reach her, the main gate to the yard swung open. The chief was back. The shadow turned to look. It and the chief stared at each other. A gunshot shattered the night. The ape leaped into the air. Then I heard the sound of hurried footsteps on the roof. It was only then that I realized that shadow wasn't the chief's wife. It was the Skin-Peeler Ape. Another shot, accompanied by the sound of shattering roof tiles. The ape disappeared into the night.
The chief's wife was dead. The ape hadn't skinned her, but the top of her skull had been ripped off, and the inside was scraped clean. I collapsed to the floor, shaking. The chief held his wife's body, crying in agony. Victor, who was beside him, said grimly, "The demon wasn't satisfied. It will definitely be back. Tonight, all women and children must hide in the cellar. The rest of us will wait for it here."
The men went from door to door, gathering the women and children to take them to the cellar. Victor pulled me to the back of the group. He lowered his voice and told me, "Leo, I know you're heartbroken, but you're a man. You have to be strong, you understand?" I nodded through my tears. "That monster is very cunning. You have to stay alert. If anything unusual happens in the cellar, you must blow this whistle as hard as you can, just like when you play in the mountains." Hearing him mention the mountain, I suddenly asked, "Grandpa Victor, didn't you say there were over 100 apes on the mountain? Why have we never seen them?" Victor sighed deeply. "We ate most of them. The meat your great-great-grandfather borrowed from the mountain, that was their flesh. But 6 of the largest and smartest ones are still alive." My heart sank. One was hard enough to deal with. There were 6 of them? What could we do? Victor looked up at 100 Ape Mountain. "The chief, your grandpa, and I once went up the mountain looking for them. We wanted to end the pact or offered to repay the debt with livestock instead of people. But we searched the entire mountain and never found them. Not even a trace. They don't live on the mountain anymore." "Not on the mountain? Then where could they be?" "I don't know. It's possible they're right here among us." Hearing that, I felt every hair on my body stand on end. I looked at the silent group of people moving in front of me. A fear I had never felt before washed over me. What if one of them was in this group? Victor saw my fear. He leaned closer and whispered, "It's just a guess, but you must stay alert, you understand? The one wearing Jack's skin is easy to spot, but we don't know where the other 5 are. I'll leave 2 men in the cellar to protect you. If anything happens, tell them and blow the whistle." I looked into his eagle-like eyes and nodded firmly. We arrived at the cellar of Barry the Butcher. His cellar was large and sturdy. As I climbed down the ladder, a wave of cold air enveloped me. I hugged my shoulders and squatted in a corner, secretly watching everyone's every move. The chief brought in a large pot of freshly boiled mutton. The warm, meaty steam filled the air, and everyone gathered around the pot, some drinking soup to warm up, others tearing at the meat. The chief gave one of the village's 4 rifles to Barry, telling him and another young man with a wood axe to protect us. Then the chief and the other men left. We sat around the pot, eating and warming ourselves. Barry the Butcher leaned his rifle against the wall and started slicing some of his dried meat into the pot. Everything seemed normal, but then I noticed someone squatting in a far corner, away from the crowd. She didn't seem interested in the mutton. Instead, she was staring intently at the rifle leaning against the wall. It was Ms. Quinn. Her husband had died of pneumonia years ago, and she lived alone, with no children. She rarely talked to anyone. Noticing me staring at her, she quickly forced an awkward smile. I've already eaten. You all have some more." A kind-hearted auntie smiled and said, "Even if you've eaten, come have some soup to warm up. It's too cold in this cellar. Don't catch a cold." She pushed a bowl of hot soup into Ms. Quinn's hands. Ms. Quinn held the soup, her smile even more awkward. She looked up and saw me still staring at her. Reluctantly, she brought the bowl to her lips and took a tiny sip. Then she swallowed with a strange expression. As soon as she swallowed, she began to cough violently. Then she started to vomit. I quickly stood up. I saw that Barry had already gone to her side and was patting her back. Ms. Quinn was vomiting so hard that her face seemed to deform. It looked like her skin was separating from her flesh, ready to fall off at any moment. I sensed something was terribly wrong. I was about to scream, but I froze. I don't know when it happened, but the young man who was supposed to be protecting us with Barry was now standing behind him with the wood axe, and he had a grotesque smile on his face, a smile that stretched from ear to ear. "Look out!" I screamed, but it was too late. The man brought the axe down on Barry's head. The butcher died instantly. His blood sprang onto the villagers' faces and into the pot of soup. The cellar erupted in screams. Everyone scrambled in chaos. In that instant, the young man leapt to the wall and kicked the rifle, breaking it in two. On the other side of the cellar, Ms. Quinn stopped vomiting. She reached up and ripped off her sagging face, revealing a furry ape's head underneath. She opened her huge mouth and lunged at the women and children. I was frozen in place, watching as flesh, bones, and scalps with hair still attached flew around the cellar. The two Skin-Peeler Apes were like wolves in a sheep pen. They killed without restraint. Screams, the sound of tearing flesh, and snapping bones assaulted my ears. I was snapped back to reality when a severed arm flew out of the crowd and hit me. I ran for the exit. I tried to blow the whistle, but I was so panicked and out of breath that no sound came out. I quickly climbed the ladder and pushed against the cellar door with my shoulder, but it felt like something heavy was on top of it. I couldn't open it. I forced myself to calm down. I put my thumb and index finger together, stuck them in my mouth, and blew. It was the loudest whistle I had ever blown in my life. I was sure the chief and Victor would hear it. Of course, the monsters in the cellar heard it too. Suddenly, everything went quiet. All the women and children were dead. Then, a bloody hand gripped the corner of the wall at the turn, and the next second, its owner would peer around and see me. I threw all my weight against the cellar door. This time, it opened. But it was Victor, opening it from the outside. I tumbled out of the cellar, slammed the door shut, and locked it. It turned out Victor had been setting traps nearby. He hadn't heard my whistle, he had heard the screams. "They're dead! They're all dead!" I screamed at him, crying. "There are two of them down there!" Hearing this, Victor's eyes widened. I felt like they were on fire. Before he could react, a heavy impact struck the cellar door. Victor quickly threw his shoulder against it and loaded his rifle. "Go get the others!" he yelled at me. "They're setting traps nearby." I had just run out of Barry's main gate when someone called my name. "Leo, are you okay?" It was the chief. He was leading the men this way. "Hurry! The monsters are in the cellar. Victor can't hold them much longer." "Get out of here!" the chief yelled, before leading his men into Barry's yard. Of course, I couldn't leave. I hid by the gate, peering nervously inside. The cellar door had been forced open. Victor's lower body was inside the cellar, while his upper body struggled outside. The monster inside was trying to pull him in. He screamed and fired his rifle down into the cellar. Every shot was met with a monstrous shriek. "Victor!" the chief yelled, rushing forward and opening fire. The other men grabbed Victor's upper body and pulled with all their might. After a moment, Victor was pulled out. But the Victor they pulled out was no longer whole. From his thighs down, he was gone. In their place were shattered white bones and the shredded meat hanging from them. The Skin-Peeler Ape that had been wearing the man's skin was pulled out with him. Its claws were still viciously tearing at Victor's legs. Victor screamed in agony. The three rifles aimed at the ape at point-blank range and fired continuously. Soon, the ape's movements slowed. It collapsed to the ground and stopped moving. A villager poked it with a smoking gun barrel. No reaction. It must be dead. The chief found rope and bandages to stop Victor's bleeding. Some villagers prepared to enter the cellar to check. I quickly poked my head out from behind the gate and yelled, "Don't go in! There's still one more in there!" Everyone raised their weapons again. The chief lowered his voice. "Aim carefully, we're low on bullets." He turned to me. "What's the situation down there?" "They're all dead. Those two killed them all." Just as I finished speaking, a small child's voice, choked with sobs, came from the cellar. "Help me! It's right next to me! I'm so scared!" Hearing this, Victor, in his agony, yelled at the villagers, "Don't fall for it! The Skin-Peeler Apes can mimic the voice of anyone they've eaten!" "Help me! I'm not dead! I was just knocked out! It's injured! It's just panting in the corner! I'm so scared!" The child's voice left the men outside, unsure of what to do. The chief turned to me again. "Are you sure they're all dead?" I pictured the scene of carnage in the cellar and nodded firmly at the chief. After getting my confirmation, the chief said to the man next to him, "Get firewood. I'm going to burn it to death." The voice seemed to hear the chief's words and immediately started crying and screaming, "No!" Piles of firewood were thrown into the cellar. The chief brought a torch, and just as he was about to throw it in, he heard a voice. "Dad?" Everyone looked up. A dark figure was standing on the roof of Barry's house. Its hair was dry like weeds, its mouth stretched to its ears. Its shriveled skin looked like it could fall off at any moment. Two large, dark eyes scanned us quickly. It was the chief's son, Jack. "Son!" The chief's voice trembled. "No, Wayne, that's not your son. That's the Skin-Peeler Ape," Victor shouted. But the chief didn't seem to hear him. "Dad, I've missed you so much. Don't you miss me?" The chief slowly lowered his gun. "I do miss you, son. Are you doing okay?" "I was doing fine before this, but you didn't keep the pact. That makes me suffer. You wasted my sacrifice."
"No, son, we've always kept the pact, but the 10 years aren't up yet, and they've already come for meat again." Ha 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 ha! Dad, you still don't get it. The time doesn't matter. What matters is that you repay the meat. "But we have been repaying it." "No, that's not enough. We need more meat and more skin now." Jack's words were chilling. Suddenly, Jack instantly leaped into the distance. It was Victor, but he had missed. As he struggled to reload, he yelled at me, "Leo, come here, stay with us." I quickly ran towards Victor. The chief also snapped back to his senses. He wiped away his tears and threw the torch into the cellar. The cellar was instantly engulfed in flames, but strangely, it was completely silent inside. It seemed the monster was no longer in there. I had a bad feeling and began to look around. I saw that behind the men stood a small woman, but all the women had just died in the cellar. She stood there like a statue, completely still. Hidden behind the tall men, no one would have noticed her. "It's there! The woman!" I screamed frantically. Everyone turned to look. The woman looked at me and gave a grotesque smile. Her mouth instantly split to her ears. Then she stretched out her claws, and with a casual swipe, the scalp of the man in front of her was ripped clean off. In that instant, 4 more dark figures leaped over the courtyard wall. They moved nimbly through the crowd. No weapon could touch them. Only the screams of the men were left behind. I came to my senses and saw that the small woman was rushing towards me. She had already leaped into the air. She was less than 2 meters from my face. I could even see the human flesh stuck between her teeth. The gunshot next to my ear nearly deafened me. It was Victor again. He had shot the woman to the ground, but she quickly scrambled up and leapt onto him. Victor used his rifle to block her attack. He yelled at me, "Leo, run!" I ran for my life. As I left, I glanced back one last time. In the midst of the blood and carnage, I saw the chief tightly embracing Jack. His face was smiling as he rested it on Jack's shoulder, but Jack's hand had pierced through the chief's chest and come out his back. In that hand, he held a bloody, beating heart. I ran and vomited, never daring to stop for a second. I don't know how long I ran or where I ended up. My mind was a complete blank. I only remembered that a thin fog started to rise again. And in the fog, a figure was waving at me. I collapsed to the ground in terror with no strength left. The figure slowly walked towards me. It was the chief, or rather, the chief's skin. The terror I had experienced over the past 2 days finally broke me. I closed my eyes and screamed at him. "Everyone in the village is dead. Isn't that enough?" You promised to repay the debt many times over. That was the meat of over 100 apes. Did you think this would be the end? What's more, you killed one of ours. Now the debt is much, much greater. But you still have 5 left alive.
If you kill me, my entire village will be gone. The pact will be over, and you'll never get anything again." After I said that, there was no reply. I carefully opened my eyes and saw the chief standing there, thinking. Behind him, in the fog, were 4 other figures. They had all come. After a moment of silence, the chief's voice spoke again. I quickly shut my eyes. "Don't try to run. No matter where you go, we will find you. The pact continues until we are satisfied." More than a decade has passed. I've grown from a little boy into a disheveled middle-aged man. I chose not to leave. Victor and I still guard this abandoned village. Yes, Victor is still alive, but he can no longer move. His body is covered in scars. Not long ago, he developed dementia. The pact continues, but it's no longer every 10 years. They can come at any time. At first, this place became a forbidden spot for explorers. Most people who came here would disappear without a trace. Each time, I would grind their bones into powder and mix it with sand to reinforce the house. But then fewer and fewer people came. I had to find another way.
I paid for a madwoman. Her brother suggested I lock her up before he left to prevent her from running away. I made the woman keep having children, but you will never see a young person walk out of my house. You might say I'm cruel, but this is my debt and my fate. It is a curse I can never escape. Until one day, Victor was gone. I knew it was time. I sealed all the doors and windows. With a single match, I set the house on fire. I sat in the yard, quietly watching it all burn. Images of the past flashed through my mind. Grandpa, Grandma, the chief's family, and Victor. We once had a happy life. Now, perhaps it's time to return to that happiness.